Why are we here today at the end of our day? Because we're talking about fundraising. Some of you are on boards, you're part of committees, maybe you just got a job at a nonprofit, and fundraising is the thing that makes your liver quiver just a little bit. Maybe you're a little nervous, you don't know how to make the ask, you're ready to make the ask, but if you don't know if you're doing it the right way, is it too much, is it not enough, should I go by myself, what question should I get it, I totally understand. When I first started fundraising, I used to work at America's Black Holocaust Museum, and I would be terrified until I started getting some tips, tricks, some strategies, some best practices. Then I felt more empowered and I felt like I knew what I was doing a little better. Did it always go my way? No, but it went my way a lot more often, and I was more comfortable doing it, and I felt more empowered doing it once I had a little bit of information. So that's what today is all about. It's about empowering you to work with the nonprofits that you're passionate about and help them in the ways that they most need help. So I want to thank all the participants for being here, and I want to thank our panelists. Alma Velez is the development director over at Pearls for Teen Girls. Joel Cencius is the executive director at Arts at Large, and he's been fundraising for a long time, lots of different kinds of experiences. Mel Klimowitz does fund development and marketing at ERIS, and I've followed her work for a really long time, mostly online. This is our first time connecting because of this event, so I'm really excited to have all three of these professionals here to talk to us a little bit about fundraising and their own passions and organizations they're a part of. So thank you, panelists, for being here. Thank you for agreeing to have this conversation. I'm really glad that all of you were able to say yes and participate in this. I'm excited. So Mel, let's start with you. Talk to us a little bit. Let's start off with this. Talk to us a little bit about what you do at work. Like, what is the organization that you serve, and what does your current fundraising role kind of look like? How much are you raising? Who are you raising from? Just kind of give us a picture of what that looks like.
Yeah, so I'm the director of development and marketing at ERIS Senior Network. So we serve Waukesha and Milwaukee counties. We support the aging population, both through client services, so especially individuals who may need transportation services to get groceries or to a health appointment. But then we also 100% of our client services is through a volunteer network. And a lot of those volunteers are also seniors. We've been around for over 40 years, and we started as an AmeriCorps seniors program, and we've evolved over the last 40 years. So my role is development, outreach, communications, as well as marketing. I started in September. And so my main focus is twofold. One, diversifying our funding to be less governmental grants and more unrestricted grants, and just unrestricted dollars in general. And we're doing those unrestricted dollars, one, through unrestricted funding, private foundations, as well as re-engaging and reinvigorating our individual and corporate donors and supporters. So we're currently going through a strategic plan update in 2024, like many nonprofits are coming out of COVID. And part of that strategic plan will be a development and marketing plan. So kind of doing all of the things right now, which is super fun and challenging. And also my brain is this keeps me up at night. Fundraising keeps me up at night. So here we are.
Yeah. Joel, how about you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Joel Cencius, Executive Director for Arts at Large. For those that do not know Arts at Large, we've been around for 23 years, and our mission is to make the arts more accessible for all here in Milwaukee. So we do that by removing barriers for people to both create art and to experience art. And what's unique about Arts at Large is that we touch every component of the creative sector in Milwaukee. So we work with artists at every stage of their professional journey. We work with students, we work with schools, we work with community partners, and we work with the neighborhood. We're in the heart of Walker's Point, and our job, again, is to find creative ways that we can help build Milwaukee's creative pipeline. So how do we get more young people to pursue their passion in art? How do we provide living wages for current artists? And more importantly, how do we reach those kids either in schools or on site here at our building who don't have access to the arts like maybe you and I had when we were kids in school? And so our organization makes sure that all of that happens. As the executive director, my responsibility is to lead the way. On the fundraising side, about 55% of our budget is reliant on development dollars. And so in order to do the good work that we do, we have to go out and raise money and make new friends. Because in order to serve more constituents and to maintain all of our programs at no cost, which is really important to us, we have to raise the dollars to do so. So I would say, a good 50% or more of my job is working with our board, working with our development director daily on all of our fundraising initiatives.
Thank you. Okay, Alma, tell us a little bit about Pearls and your fund development role there.
Sure. Hola, soy Alma Velez. I am Alma Velez, and I am the Director of Development for Pearls. I've been here 5 months. But I've been in fundraising for over 16 years, working with some of the largest nonprofits. So bringing all that full circle to a small organization is almost it's amazing because there's so much learning there. But my role here at Pearls for Teen Girls, our mission is to build stronger communities one girl at a time. And for us, when girls win, we all win. So we have a curriculum that really focuses on what the Pearls, what it stands for. So Pearls is personal responsibility, empathy, awareness, respect, leadership, and support. So our curriculum really covers that and allows the girls to build a future for themselves on their own terms. So truly changing society, changing the culture. We want to be able to keep talent here in Wisconsin. So by being able to empower them through our programming, it is crucial for us to bring in the revenue. So my role is really ensuring, just like Mel, really diversifying the revenue, because we are primarily funded by larger philanthropic organizations. But it's truly kind of looking at what our lines of revenue is and where the potential is. So I'm excited because I love that. I love the research and the analytics, and then identifying where those pockets are in, but truly driving our impact and our mission is what is very unique about Pearls.
Yeah. So there are a lot of people in the chat. There's varying degrees of expertise in fundraising, but we talked a lot about in the marketing, just kind of tap into what would make somebody want to attend a session like this. And a lot of times it's because making the ask for a person that is not accustomed to doing it can be nerve-wracking, or you don't really know how to approach it, or if it's appropriate. It's just, just generally we don't ask people for money. And this is the one time where it's kind of appropriate to do it. And it's like, how do you mentally get yourself there? When you started fundraising, do you remember, were you always a natural at it, or do you remember being a little uneasy or concerned, and how did you overcome it? Joel, you can start and then we'll just kind of go around.
You always have butterflies. I always say, I literally have this on my conference room table. It says, do one thing every day that scares you. And it's my daily reminder, and to my team. You wouldn't be doing it right if it didn't give you a little bit of anxious, anxiety. But, as has been shared, you learn tips and tricks and tools that you put into your toolkit over time that make it easy. And one of mine that I carry with me, and I credit Marcy Heim, she's one of our local fundraising sheroes. She has a 3-sentence ask that is brilliant, that I have used throughout my entire career. And it's literally 3 sentences. And I've used that all the time with board members, with my bosses, when I've reported up to a leader, to really distill down what it is you're asking for, because a confused donor never gives. So that to me has been my biggest tool that has helped with my anxiety, because that's something that you can prepare ahead of time, you can practice ahead of time. And ultimately, if you're doing it right, whether you're the person making that ask, or you're doing an ask with someone else within the organization, the donor's not going to be surprised. You know, there's ongoing cultivation that happens, and donors are usually looking to be asked. And my fellow panelists will agree with this. Like, the number one rule about fundraising is you have to ask. I've had so many donor situations where I've been thanked that we asked them. And so, and the other thing I would just throw out there, one last thing, is that no doesn't mean never. It just means not right now. So you have to get over that fear of rejection. Once you can get over that fear of rejection, the anxiety about asking for a gift is going to reduce greatly.
Mel, you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Donors want to give their money, but they don't always know how to do it. And so as a fundraiser, it's helping guide their growth through the organization, through the mission and the vision of the organization, and not be super clear, not in a manipulative way, but they know development means fundraising. And it's just supporting them in that ask. Or I'm sorry, just supporting them in that journey until we get to the ask. And then after the ask, exactly what Joel said, continuing on with that relationship cultivation. So I don't have it right now, but I have a sign that says inspire and empower. And same thing, I use it with my team all the time. And Joel, you'll actually like this. The one that I have painted in my office is by an artist who is currently one of the teachers through Arts at Large. So I'm connected with your work, and he painted this sign for my office. But that's the other part, is it might be scary, but as a fundraiser, your job is to help inspire and empower a donor. And that's really what grounds me in becoming a fundraiser. I think a lot of people in development and fundraising have just fallen into it. I was a teen mom, and so I got my start in nonprofits by literally sending my resume and like a cold cover letter to nonprofits saying, I'll do social media for you, until something stuck.
Wow.
And then something did stick, and then it just turned into development and fundraising and like just figuring it out. And just absorbing as much information from panels and webinars, and I guess now there's ChatGPT to like absorb all this information and kind of teach myself what it's about. And it truly comes back to relationships. It truly comes back to who you know and how you're connected, and cultivating that. Whether it's asking for a sponsorship or silent auction, or, you know, an individual donor or a corporate supporter, it's truly, what is their why? And does their why match and fit into your company's why? And if it doesn't, that's okay. But if it does, what does that look like? I've worked with so many donors who are like, this is why I want to give. This is what I want to give to. And I'm like, that's awesome. And that is not our mission.
Mm-hmm.
So here's an organization you could connect with, but that's not for us. And you're going to be really miserable because I want to be a good steward of their dollars. And so understanding the why behind that is really important. And again, inspiring and empowering them to give within that passion.
I'm going to talk to us a little bit about your fundraising story. Have you always been good at it? Were you ever nervous? Like, how did you overcome it if you were nervous?
Well, fundraising wasn't my lifelong dream. But as Mel, I was also a teen mom. I actually moved here from San Diego to Wisconsin to Milwaukee when I was 19 years old with an 18-month-old son. And maybe I'll get into a lot of detail, but I mean, I was divorced by 21. It was an abusive relationship. So I really had to work my way from the bottom up. And I didn't start in fundraising until a few years later. I was going to community college and thinking I was going to be a paralegal. I love law. And I stumbled into fundraising through my employer at that time. They needed somebody to lead some of the efforts. Our executive VP, his mother died from his parents died from heart disease, and he was really passionate about it, but they had only raised $500. So I discovered the matching gift program in 2004. So all those dollars were just staying there. Nobody used them. And those matching gifts, if you give $25, it turns into 50. If you give at $1,000, it turns into $2,000. It's an investment of the company to the organizations that you want the money to go towards. And that's how we went from 500 to 66,000 and then 100,000. And then they came looking for me to come and fundraise for them.
Wow.
But again, started from the bottom, learning a lot of I was an administrator, then a coordinator, and then moved up to a director role. But learned so much in the process. And one thing I have learned is it's an investment. When people give, it's an investment in your community, in health awareness, wherever it is. And it really does come full circle, but it really is, if you're not comfortable asking, then have that support, right? It's really about having coming together as a group and as change makers to be able to utilize your strengths. If your strength is in asking, maybe that development director is, or a coordinator, or you open the door, we'll close the deal. What is it? This is supposed to be fun. It isn't supposed to be stuffy or something that's like, oh my goodness, I got to go to a job or do this. It really is about empowering you and utilizing your strengths and the uniqueness of why you're drawn to that organization and why you are if you want to help. And one tip that I have is always ask people that I won't say no to you. So we all have those friends, right? We all have those friends that they can't say no to us. So ask them first. So the low-hanging fruit, where are those people? And that is what makes fundraising fun.
That's a great way to boost your confidence. Like the first couple, but you know what as I was listening to you, I was thinking most times when you hear fundraising or you think about fundraising, you fast forward all the way to the moment that you ask. But there's so many things that happen before you get to that point. Talk to us a little bit about, in your experience, what that process is. That ask is a moment in time, but what are you doing as the lead up? Like we talked about understanding people's why or knowing what the connections were. Like what does that journey generally look like? What should people be thinking about doing before they even get to that point, Joel? And then Matt.
Yeah, so great question. I tell our board all of the time, and I will share this with every participant on this call. The number one way that you can help any cause, charity, organization you're connected to or involved with is just like Alma said, it's knowing and understanding your why. Because that is so powerful. That is the door opener. So for all of us who work in the nonprofit sector, no matter where we work, if we're on the program side, the operations side, or the development side, the best thing that you can do as an outside volunteer is to help introduce our organization to new people. That is, if that's all you did as a volunteer, you are a rockstar volunteer. And so if you leave with anything tonight, I hope you leave with this concept that fundraising isn't some big, scary, complicated thing. It's really, you have to develop, what is your why? Why am I involved with this organization? Why does this organization matter? And I take my board through this exercise of close your eyes. If you woke up tomorrow and this organization that you love and care for closed its doors, how would Milwaukee be different? You know, if Arts at Large was not here tomorrow, how would that impact Milwaukee? That really helps you figure out what your why is, right? As a leader of this organization, that really fuels my why every day. And so that is the best piece you can do, because on the cultivation cycle, so there is a wheel. There is a wheel we follow in the development world. It's a big circle. About 25% of that circle is just introduction and engagement with the organization. So a simple introduction, whether that's a tour, whether that's attending an event, signing up for that organization's newsletter, following them on social media. So how can you introduce someone to the organization? Once they're introduced, how are we as the organization going to engage that individual? So maybe that person on the newsletter sign up said, they want to help with special events, or they would like to serve on a committee. So introduction, engagement, and then during that process of engagement, you learn what connects that person to that organization. So you really, during that time that you spend with them at events or on a committee or in the work that they're doing directly for the organization, you'll learn they really, really like this program that we do. That's the program that really lights them up when they talk about it or when they're at an event. And that really helps you figure out that's probably where they would want to give. That's probably part of the organization they want to invest the most in, or they're the most interested in. And so you personalize your ask. You don't just do a generic ask. The ask must be personal to the person that you're asking. So if you're asking a corporate donor for a sponsorship, and that corporation does not invest in the arts, and you're an arts organization, you're probably not going to get a gift. So you have to do your homework. What does that individual value? What does that corporation value? Because you do your homework and you get it right, 9 times out of 10, you'll get that ask will be favorable. And then the last part, the last chunk of time is stewardship. So after the ask is made and the gift is made, the process isn't done. You have to thank that donor. You have to make sure that donor knows the impact of that gift, no matter the size of the gift. And then that whole process starts all over again. Because once that donor gave, now you ask that donor to introduce someone to the organization. Or you ask that company, who else should we be asking, or who else values or supports the arts that we should be on our radar? Because once someone makes an investment in your organization, they do feel more invested in you. And so they're going to want to tell other people about that investment because they're proud of that. They're proud that they supported you and they helped you. So that's the circle. And all of you on the call today, the part of the circle that you can help us the most in is introducing people to the organization.
Yep. Mel?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything Joel said. I want to emphasize 2 things. One, inviting a friend to an organizational event, whether you're a board member or a volunteer, is a huge thing. That's huge, because that's going to introduce them to the nonprofit in a different way than the website or the newsletter can do. That's your living, breathing introduction. And also, let's be honest, recruiting registrations for special events is competitive as heck, because there are so many nonprofits in Milwaukee, in Wisconsin. There are more, I almost said this right before the call, there are more nonprofits per capita in Wisconsin than anywhere else. And so being a nonprofit donor and like soliciting donors is competitive, and not in a way that's isolating. Like, I'm never going to isolate somebody to be like, only give to us. But there's only so many galas you can go to. And so being really strategic, and hey, I'm a board member. I know you have, like, for us, we support family caregivers. So, hey, I'm a board member. I know that you work full time, but you're also taking care of a parent who's a senior and they might need some support. You should check out Era's Gala with me. I have an extra ticket. That is great. Because again, they're being introduced to the organization at a very, like Alma said, in a very fun way. Mm-hmm. It's not a newsletter. Even though newsletters can be fun as well. So that's the first point. And the second point I want to make is, when Joel said it's a very specific ask, the very specific ask can also be specific to giving to the unrestricted fund, if that makes sense. So the specific ask is become a monthly donor to support our unrestricted funding because that impacts staff capacity and that helps organizational growth. And so a specific ask, again, it's specific, but it can be broad in that way, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Mhm. Alma, a little bit about that. What's the journey? What's the process before you get to the ask?
Sure. So for me, and I'm just going to share this piece right now because I feel like it'd be really useful for everybody as, can you see my screen? What
Yep.
makes you different? So
Mhm.
this is the circle, the golden circle that Joel and Mel were talking about in finding your why. That is one of the first steps. But there's a balance between your organization and your personal why. And how do you marry that? Because the storytelling is where you are going to make the most impact. How is this? Why are you so passionate about the organization that you are supporting?
Mhm.
So to go back, for me, it really is about um, moving the donor through the continuum. So how much do they know about the organization even before I ask them for anything? It's about learning about them. So I really do apply more so the principles of the human progress, and I can share this after, but it's how do you approach people with dignity, with openness, mutual benefit, obviously, and how do you self-actualize in the bottom up? So basically starting by creating that is truly how societies are come together, but how do you build a relationship with that individual? How much do they know about the organization? If they know nothing, then you start there and then you move them through the continuum and connect them through because it has to be a good fit, just like Mel said. It really is about finding the right fit. Also, these are the I'd like to call it demystifying the barriers, but it really is learning that before you move individuals through the continuum, kind of demystifying that fundraising. Fundraising is not evil. So it's not. People see me like, oh my God, Alma's here to ask me for money. Probably true. But, great fundraisers are born. You learn the principles, you do your research. And doing your research isn't trolling, isn't stalking somebody. It's really just learning about them and even asking others, what are they passionate about? And a lot of individuals we have a lot of passionate individuals and philanthropic individuals here in Milwaukee, in the greater Milwaukee area, and in Wisconsin overall. And it's just learning and having a clear strategy. What are you asking? But before you ask, it's really learn about them. Then it comes for me, the identifying the why and having a balance between the head and the heart, because values do inspire action through emotion. And so then that storytelling comes through, and you don't have to learn the entire mission, but really know what you're speaking of. And if you can't elaborate, bring somebody else. It's like, you know what? I don't know, but let me ask this individual, let me connect you. So learning how to effectively communicate and in a few sentences, know the impact that your organization that you are supporting has, and allow others to tell the story too. You might know the behind the scenes, but the stories of those impacted are so incredibly valuable because lived experiences, just like I mentioned, for about me, those are things that really impact people. And then leveraging the measurement. How are you measuring? Data is so important. I love data. I love numbers. That also helps you, and it'll allow you to be transparent with your donors and those that you come in contact with through the volunteer and donor development. But all these fall in that continuum and how you really move through the process, right? Because it is a process, but through each process is about building trust. So for me, it's hugely important to build trust with my donors.
When you all are working with your own volunteers, how do you work together to decide? I mean, a big asset, right? Like you said, is that they help you identify new potential donors. do you ask, like, how do you decide, like, how much to ask that person? Is it based on what they've given before, what your volunteers think the person might get? Like, does that play into the way you engage them? And how, if for folks who are listening, just start dropping your questions in the chat. Sophia is gonna ask them for you. So whatever questions you have, just start asking them. But yeah, like, how do you know what the amount, like, how does that play into the whole process?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, time is our most precious commodity, right? And so, you as a volunteer have to be a gatekeeper. We as staff have to be gatekeepers of how are we spending our time. So ultimately, any sophisticated and successful fundraising strategy is going to have a breakdown of how you allocate time. And so, for those who are considered major gift donors in our world, those individuals are going to get more of our time. Those companies, those foundations, and those individual donors who are at a certain level or higher based on their giving history or their capacity, they're going to ultimately get more of my time, more of a board member's time, just due to the fact that we know that that time is going to result in a much larger impact. That's a different strategy than, say, a monthly giving program or an annual giving program where maybe people are giving $100 or fewer, and that's something that they give on a regular basis.
Yeah.
I always say this: people give to people. Ultimately, they're giving to the organization, but this is a very relationship-driven business. And I use this example all the time, but for any of you who have pets, this is true. Your dog or your cat picks their person. And maybe it's not you. Maybe it's not you who went to go pick that dog up from the shelter. Maybe your dog fell in love with your 5-year-old and picked your 5-year-old. But we're humans and we also pick our people. And so I've said this in every organization I worked for. Our job is to figure out who our donors pick, right? Who do our donors feel more comfortable with? It's not always the executive director, or it's not always the board chair. So part of the job of figuring out how much to ask for is really understanding, like, who's going to do the ask, who has the strongest relationship, because it doesn't always go by title. And then the last thing I would say to figuring out the amount, yes, the organization should do their homework and give you, the volunteer, some background information of their giving history. But it also is, how big of an impact do you want to make? At my last organization, we purposely set out to break a record and to do something that we had never done before. And we made a pretty big and bold, audacious goal. And to all 5 of those donors that the president and I reached out to do those asks, we said, we are going big. We are going to ask you for something that we've never asked you for before, because we are really excited and we want you to be really excited about this project. And we went big and we asked big. And so it's a little bit of science, it's a little bit of data, but a lot of it is intuition. And again, knowing who that person is that donor connects the most with.
Alma, Mel, add whatever you like.
Oh, well, Mel, did you want to go first?
Go ahead.
Honestly, I do have to agree with Joel, but also doing the research, there are some nuggets that you can find online. So for instance, ProPublica has a nonprofit angle, and you can type the name of the organization and their 1090s are on there. So they show you how much they've given in the past. You can align them with your pillars. It's important that making sure that the organization and the donor align, because if you don't align, then what are you doing? Where's the impact? How are you measuring that? So again, there are organizations as well that may not necessarily align, but there are different types of funding that are out there available. And when it comes to individuals, the same components are available. However, it is looking at the history. So if you just started at an organization and you have a list of donors, for example, and you may not know some of them, then do the history. Ask your team for data or look for the data yourself, and there has to be a historical. So you can't go, if that person gave 10,000, you can't ask them 50,000.
Right, right.
Really, we know that you've donated $10,000 in the past. Are you willing to invest that amount again? Or, we are really wanting to start off this project, and this is how we're going to measure. So make sure you have the measurables and your priorities, a plan in place to make sure, because donors want to give to things that are going to be successful. So it truly is about being very transparent with that, and ensuring that if there might be a little bit of a, maybe that donor went away for a while because they weren't happy with what was going on with the organization, how do you steward that relationship and asking them again? And as a new individual, it's really about be very transparent in acknowledging it. Don't hide things. Being very transparent with the donor, and ensuring that you have that history in front of you, and you have something available to you, knowing, just educating yourself on what is it that you're looking to do and how you want that donor to help the mission.
And
And
it's all this prep and mail right after. You can comment right after this, but I'm just thinking, I feel like it's like anything, the more you're prepared ahead of time, it's like the real work comes way before you get there. So a lot of that nervousness is because people don't feel prepared. That's like, it's like if you do the
It's
work.
scary though. It is
Yeah.
scary. I can tell you that when I was starting, I'm sorry, but I was scared. I was doing my research, and I thought I had to be so professional and do things a certain way, and I don't want to mess up, and leave that behind. It's really about, the head and the heart I talk about, right? It's about being able to take from your personal experiences and share that, and the money does follow once you are able to showcase what Arts at Large is doing, what Pearls is doing, what any other organization, because all these organizations are doing good in our community. So what is it unique? It's about the storytelling and building. You just don't, and making sure you do the research. But again, be prepared. You might not utilize it all. Just keep it conversational.
Mel?
I was just going to add those $1 million asks, or those, big, extravagant investments from your donors. When you make that ask, you have had years of practice asking them already, working up to that point. So, and as a board member, as a volunteer, you are always going to have the support of the staff, of the executive director, of, the development director. And so those really big asks, exactly what Alma said, you're working up to big asks. And oftentimes, let's be honest, when there's a big ask like that, the executive director is going to make it, or the development director is going to make it. But what Joel said, that may be your contact. That might be your person. And so you will have practiced these conversations with that person again and again and again. And that is going to just, as you're making those asks, you're building confidence every single time. And so right out the gate, you're not going to be making this extravagant ask. And if you are, you have that historical data that Alma mentioned. And so, when you make an ask, you can be confident in that yes, because you've built up to it.
Yep, I see. So Sophie, you can come back on the screen whenever you're ready. Again, participants, if you have questions, put them in the chat and we will ask them. I see one in the Q&A. Sophie, what do we have in there?
Yeah, from Lisa Jones at Micah Milwaukee, which is another great nonprofit organization. She asks, if someone wanted to learn more about fundraising, what training or schooling is needed? Is there a certain certification process that's helpful to knowing more about how to make that ask?
Yeah, in our field, it's your CFRE. I have the CFRE. I highly recommend starting that journey, if this is a field and work that you want to do, I have two fundraising sheroes. Marcy Heim, who's located out of Madison, has raised millions of dollars in her career, and Tammy Zonker. Tammy Zonker, one of the top 25 rated fundraisers in the country. Her organization's called Fundraising Transformed. Both of those individuals I would highly recommend. In our field, we like to tease and say there's consultants and then there's consultants. The consultants are the ones that have never actually raised money, but they go around telling everyone how to raise money. And then there's the ones that have actually raised money. And so Marcy and Tammy have raised money, and I've learned so much from them. And they have a lot of free resources. You know, some of the misconceptions is that, oh, I have to pay all this money to go on a conference, or I've got to pay all this money to download these materials. Our industry is very, we share a lot of things, and we're open to sharing a lot of things because oftentimes it's going to just help the world do more good, right? And so Tammy just had a free two-day conference last week that was completely free, all virtual, completely free to anyone who could sign up for it. So I would highly recommend checking those two out. But ultimately, yeah, if you want to do this business, just Google CFRE. UWM has an amazing nonprofit leadership program. UW Parkside does locally. So there are resources locally if that's something that you're interested in.
I'm working, sorry, go ahead.
I don't talk too much, Mel. You go.
No, I was just gonna say, I'm actively working towards my CFRE right now. And it's a rigorous process, but it is such a supportive process. And so that is definitely something I echo, I highly recommend. I think the other part about that is UWM, as well as, I can't remember what it's called, but I'll find it and throw it in the chat. It's Joan Gary's it's Joan Gary's nonprofit, fundraising stuff. She also has a lot of board development stuff on there. And so that is really helpful as well. She has some paid gated content as well, but she does a lot of podcasts. And so that's all free. And so that's really helpful. I always just listen to it as I'm like driving or something. So she's another one. And then another person that I've been recently really leaning into his expertise, is the CEO. His name is Michael. I can't remember his last name right now because it is almost 5 o'clock. But he is the CEO of the Boys and Girls Club in Dane County. And he has done phenomenal work turning that organization around fundraising wise. So I highly recommend checking him out. And he does a lot of free webinars and speaks at a lot of conferences as well.
It's Michael Johnson?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anything to add, Alma?
Yes. I think for me, right now is when I'm getting the most trained. I've had so much on the job training, learning internally, right? But having that support, UWM has great education, I have to tell you, and also Spectrum Nonprofit Services. Steve Zimmerman is fantastic, and he's local, but he's just learning every aspect of what is fundraising and being able to, like you said, not thinking that you're a con, but your lived experiences are so valuable. But again, education is so important. So that's why I'm kind of wanting to have these accreditations, because we truly do believe that in order for us to do our work to the best of our ability, we need that support. So I'm so happy that UWM and so many nonprofits are willing to invest, ensuring that nonprofit professionals have that. It's truly something that is incredible. And for me, Stand Together, which is out of DC, is a nonprofit organization. Anybody that wants to go ahead and look them up, they support nonprofit and smaller organizations like ours to ensure that they have the tools to be able to be empowered yourself and be able to utilize these stories. So a lot of the learning that I shared here in the paradigms, I learned from Stand Together Foundation. They really want to have to create social change and culture. So for me, it was just it really came full circle, because I felt that Wisconsin had so much that gave me and empowered me to grow. I could have been a statistic, and I wasn't. Why? Because I felt that they invested in me. So for me, being in this role and being able to raise dollars for our communities and our everyday people is so important. Giving back myself in a way that with my talent. So for me, it's just a lot of it. If you learn it along the way, but having that training is just so needed. So that balance, finding that balance, and those that will support you, because not everybody can afford it.
Perfect. A question for Mel regarding the CFRE certification process, since you're going through it right now. What kind of a time commitment and a cost commitment is there to that? And do your nonprofit sponsor that for you?
Yeah, so I'm actually gonna bop this over to Joel, because he's gone through the whole process. But it is so the CFRE process, not only are they are giving you resources to study because you take an exam, but they are tracking your last 5 years of fundraising professionalism. And so you're using, once you reach a certain level of like how many hours essentially you've put in fundraising, they give you some materials, you study said materials, they give you a study guide, there's webinars, and then you take the exam and you become CFRE. It's a really great process. I like just started it last year and I'm loving it. And right now I'm really just tracking, like, this is what I've done in the last few years, and working into that stuff. It's a combination of what you've done on the job as well as professional development that you've engaged with. Joel, do you have anything you want to add?
All of that. You have to have raised a certain amount of dollars. You've had to have a certain number of professional hours, meaning you've had to have jobs where direct fundraising was a responsibility. You have to be a volunteer outside of your day job. So you have to also be a volunteer on board service or in other organizations. The application process itself is a journey, because you have to hit a certain number of hours. And then I believe for initial certification, it might be 85 or 90 professional development hours you have to accumulate. So that can be as inexpensive or as expensive depending upon what you find. You can go and attend a free webinar and that would count. You could go and travel to Chicago and attend a 3-day conference and that would count. So anyone who wants to start that journey, I would recommend keeping track of all of the PD that you do with dates and times and who is the speaker, what was the title of the seminar, because you have to put all of that information in. And then cost, I leveraged this at a former employer because there were salary freezes. And so I said, well, since you can't give me a salary increase and I hit my fundraising goals, will you pay for my CFRE certification? And they said, absolutely. So leverage it as a benefit with your employer. Now I always ask for my employer, because I have to re-up every 3 years. You have to recertify. You don't have to retest, but you have to recertify every 3 years. I always ask my employer to pay half of that recertification fee, and then I pay the other half, because I feel that that's fair. We're both getting something out of it. But yeah, it's a little bit of change. But when I've asked my fundraising heroes and mentors, do I need to get an MBA or my CFRE? They're like, Joel, if you want to do this work for the rest of your career, get your CFRE. It'll take you a lot farther than going through, a very expensive degree program. So, and I know we're running out of time, and I just want to also answer Bridget's question real quick, because this one really hit home for me, because I've had to do a lot of this in my career, a lot of it. And that's, how do you rebuild trust with donors? So either because of organizational change or leadership or turnover or you name it, my number one piece of advice, own it. Be accountable. I walked into an organization that has a lot of history, and I'm our first non-founder or founder-related leader. And there was a lot of change. And one of the first calls I had to make was to a funder who had been funding us since our existence and stopped funding us this year. And I had to do my homework to figure out why. And I had to, the first thing I said was, we need to do better. We will do better, and own it. And so, you know, I can't take full responsibility for actions and decisions that were made before me, but I can, you know, I'm the leader of the organization, and there has to be accountability. And every single time I've walked into a conversation, admitting what we did, whether it was we sent in a report that was late, or there was an error, or we did not follow through on our promised deliverables. Every single time I've apologized and owned that and told them what we're doing now to make sure that won't happen again, I've been able to start rebuilding that relationship. So I think the biggest thing you can do is to just acknowledge whatever the organization did, because oftentimes it is someone was at fault, someone dropped the ball, and move on from that. That has been very, very helpful for me.
That's a great reply. Just own it. I mean, that's true everywhere, right? Own it.
It's truly accountability and transparency.
Yeah.
Like always, always, always.
Mhm.
Just to add to that, people just want to be heard. So listening to them, really listening to them is what's important to them. Sometimes, I mean, it happens to everybody. You just want to be heard. Once you lay that out, then you can move on.
Mhm. We're right at time. There's one more question. I'll take that question and email it to you all, and then you can respond that way, and we'll just forward the question. It's a good question, but it's probably a little more detailed than we have time for, because I mean, this was great. The time blew by. We're right at 5:01. I want to thank the entire panel. Thank you so much for all of your insight and generosity. You all are amazing. The participants, go to the chat and help us thank the panelists. Help us just say thank you. What did you learn? What insights did they give you? Do you feel more confident? Do you feel more empowered? Are you ready to plan? Are you going to become a fundraiser? We see the love notes coming into the chat. Thank you. Thank you so much.